Greetings from smoky and rainy Edmonton. It is July 21st, and this is my video intro to my latest e-newsletter. This e-newsletter is my special CPP edition. If you are viewing this on YouTube, you're not a newsletter subscriber, and you just happen across this video, just to let you know, there is a newsletter that you can subscribe to. You'll find a link in the description of this video, and I'll also talk about it at the end of this video. Also, subscribing to this YouTube channel is much appreciated. I've been doing this now for, I don't think for quite a year yet, but nice to see the number of subscribers going up. Your subscription is much appreciated. So I'm going to be using most of this video to talk about the timing decision around CPP, as I highlighted in a recent CPP blog post, which you can find linked in the newsletter. You'll also find it on my main homepage right near the bottom. But I wanted to touch on just one quick thing here, which is a chart that I've often brought up in various newsletter intro videos I've done over the years, and that is the index matrix chart. So this will look very familiar to anyone who's been getting my newsletter for the last couple of years. I often like to go over this as a representation of the stock markets overall, over the very long term, in a way that is, I find, more useful than just seeing a line that goes up from the bottom left to the top right. That means very little to us who are not invested for quite 100 years. But this index matrix chart, once you kind of understand it and get your bearings to what all these color-coded squares mean, kind of illustrates what is the medium to long-term effect of investing in the markets, and also what is the pain that we feel when the markets go down. And the pain is represented here in red. What this chart does very well is when you mouse over and say click any particular square, it'll tell you precisely what the market did over that time span, in this case from 1987 to 2010. The return over that particular time frame was 9.6% annually, and that's the US total market index. It's outlined here what index is being looked at. Now the great news now is that I used to have to subscribe to this thing, and it is now freely available to anyone who just goes to theindexmatrix.com. So you yourself can go there and play around with this chart. I know I've had a couple of clients ask me about that. How do I get access to this? It is now freely accessible. There's a bit of a description on their main webpage as to how to use this chart, how it works. There are, of course, many different indexes that you can look at. And rather than going too long into this in this video, I'm going to be pushing that off to my next video in August. And I'll go into this in a little bit more depth, give you a tutorial on how you can get some meaning out of these charts. So moving on, I wanted to go over some of the charts and provide a brief explanation of my when should you start CPP blog post. And this is really for those who don't have the time to read it all. Maybe also having a little video description might provide you a little bit more guidance as opposed to reading and trying to interpret the charts yourself. Again, you'll find it at the bottom of my homepage. It's also really easy to find anytime, muhs.ca/CPP. When I first started blogging in 2014, I based all my blog posts around questions that a lot of clients asked me. So if a question came up numerous times, whenever we were doing a financial plan, that is something I wrote a blog post about because it provides a nice resource that I can refer you to in the future if you have this question, if it comes up. And of course, it helps maybe guide people to my website if they are themselves looking to answer this question. When should I start my CPP? So also in my most recent newsletter, you'll find a link to a podcast that Justin and I did with Jason Yee. You'll also find it just simply at the bottom of my webpage right next to this blog post. And in it, we have a lengthier discussion on Canada Pension Plan, a lot of the ins and outs, how it's calculated, what are the effects of the enhanced Canada Pension Plan. But this question will come up at some point. When should you start your Canada Pension Plan? In this, because I didn't want to update all these charts, I'm using 2022 numbers. And the 2022 maximum actually equates to about 88% of today's maximum, which gives you an idea of the inflation effect on that amount, which is also a very important consideration. Once you start your Canada Pension Plan, the amount that you get goes up at the full rate of CPI inflation. And from 2022 to now, that number has gone up from about $1,200 something a month to $1,433 a month. So let's say today that you're starting your Canada Pension Plan at 65, or maybe you're 60 now and you're planning to start your Canada Pension Plan in a number of years. You already know you qualify for about 88%. That's where these numbers will be useful. And there are, of course, a lot of a number of considerations that I go over in this blog post. The one I'm going to focus on is how does longevity affect that? And really, how long do you have to live if you're starting Canada Pension Plan at a certain age to get the most out of it? And that's something we can't all predict, but it is worth knowing that the age you have to get to in order to get a better payout when you're starting it at 65 or 70 versus age 60 isn't actually that high. And let me show you. So again, the numbers we're going by are starting at 65, having about a $12.54 a month CPP eligibility at 65, which would be this dark blue line, versus starting it earlier at age 60. And you can start your Canada Pension Plan anytime from age 60 to 70. It doesn't have to be specifically at those particular ages, but this just shows how that line, the slant of that line changes. So it's at age 60, you start your CPP, you get a lower payment. That payment is reduced by 0.6% per month, which works out to 36% if you start it a full 5 years before the normal start age, which is age 65. If you decide to start your CPP at 65, you're going to get a higher amount per month. So the slant of that line is a bit steeper. You're accumulating more money. And then at a certain age, you will have accumulated more money if you started at 65 versus if you started at age 60. This light blue line is if you start at 70. At age 70, you're getting basically a bonus of 0.7% per month after your 65th birthday, which works out to 42% if you wait all the way till your 70th birthday. You're basically getting that much more per month from that point forward. You'll obviously be quite a bit behind the game if you started at age 70 versus those who started at 65 or 60, but because you're getting that much more per month, it doesn't take that long until you reach the point where you have accumulated more money than if you had started at age 60, and then a few more years, more money than if you started at age 65. So what are those actual crossover points? So keep in mind that CPP goes up with inflation. I have completely ignored inflation in these numbers just for simplicity. So we're kind of considering these numbers as if the normal age at 65 pays you $15,000 per year, if you started at age 60, you're going to be getting $96.36 per year with that reduction. You only have to live past 73 for it to make sense to start at 65 versus 60. Now, if we're looking at that age 70 start versus age 65, you have to live past age 81, and that's this crossover point right here. The age 60 versus 70 decision, you only have to live till 78. So what this means in dollar terms is if you start your CPP at age 60 and you qualify for 88% of the maximum in this case, your annual income from CPP will be $96.36 per year. Again, going up with inflation for the rest of your life, but that's it. Had you waited till age 70, that income would be over $21,000 per year. Again, that number going up with inflation from age 70 onwards. And so if you think about it, in this case, 19 years of getting a little bit under $10,000 per year versus 9 years of getting $21,000 per year, those numbers roughly line up. And that's where that crossover point happens. And once you've passed age 78, you'll end up being in better shape having had started your CPP at age 70. Now, these numbers are only taking into account what happens if you actually spend every dollar that you make from CPP, that there's really no time value component to that money. Really just the raw dollars. Again, they're going up with inflation, but we're not taking into account that maybe you could have used this money and invested it. Maybe this money from your CPP offsets some other type of income, like income from your RIF, which is invested. So that's why I created these next two charts. These are putting time value of money to these numbers, and they help illustrate what the effect is of that. So now we no longer have straight lines, we have curved lines. This is looking at a 3% real return growth rate, 3% above and beyond inflation. Maybe your money in your RIF is invested in some kind of a balanced portfolio anyways. This is how longevity impacts that CPP decision for you. Because again, you need to factor in a little bit of time value into those numbers. So now the crossover points have pushed back a little bit. So that age 60 versus 65 has moved from 73 to 76. and the age 60 versus 70 has moved back to age 81. This is using a 5% real return growth rate. Now, 5% real return above and beyond inflation. So if we take into account inflation as 2%, that would mean a 7% nominal growth rate. This might not sound like a lot to a lot of people, but a lot of the sources of information that we rely on for return estimates for our financial planning, such as FP Canada, they actually at the high end assume 7% as a long-term growth rate for stocks. And for certain asset classes like US equities might even have a lower growth rate expectation than that. So that is basically to say that you might not get that 5% real return rate. And I'm not suggesting that you will, but what this is meant to show you is how your own risk tolerance level, your willingness to take risk with your investments in retirement, factor into this decision as well. And of course, these lines are a little bit more curved, and they push those crossover points back a little bit more. 60 versus 65 goes to age 78. 70 versus 65 gets pushed back all the way to age 91. And the 60 and 70 crossover points go to age 84. So again, if you think of it, if you had this money, let's say you had money invested for your retirement in a RIF, and starting CPP earlier means taking less out of your RIF in those earlier years, leaving that money to invest longer, then this type of a chart might apply to you. Now, with all that said, everyone's situation is different in retirement. We know this, right? People have different risk tolerance levels. They have different sources of income in retirement. Some people have nice defined benefit pension plans from their work. Others do not. Others rely on saving a lot of money in investments and riding the risk of the markets, even through retirement. And of course, people have different needs for income in retirement, different goals for their money. Maybe they need all that money from CPP to fund their lifestyle, or maybe they expect to donate a lot of money in their lifetime to charity, or maybe a lot of it is expected to go to beneficiaries. So the key thing is that this decision should not be made in the absence of a complete retirement plan, or at the very least thinking about some rationale as to why would you want to start your CPP at 60 versus 65 or 70 versus 65, basically to have some rationale behind that decision, maybe some evidence in the form of a financial plan, as opposed to just making that decision emotionally, or maybe just because you want that money now, or you're just thinking, hey, it'll be cool to have a higher income in retirement from CPP. Obviously, that's where I come in, and financial planners like me, what we do is we look at your overall cash flows now and in retirement, and how does that mix come together? Now, the thing I've noticed, and I mentioned this in the conclusion of the blog post, is that the stats on Canadians when they start their CPP would indicate that they're not putting a lot of thought into this decision. They're not getting a lot of help from financial planners. The lion's share of people in their 60s are starting CPP prior to age 65. And I need to emphasize too that age 65 is the normal age to start CPP. Any diversion from that is a decision you make. So it's not a decision on deciding to defer from 60 to 65. It's rather a choice of, do I actively want to make that decision to start CPP 5 years early, 4 years early, 3 years early, whatever. Or do I want to, once I've reached age 65, decide to defer that a little bit longer? Again, there are a lot of factors that go into this, which I mentioned in the blog post, some of which I mentioned in the blog post. But one interesting one is that the lion's share of Canadians don't actually have a defined benefit pension plan through their work. I count myself in that category. I rely on money that I've saved up over my lifetime to be there when I'm retired and to be there long enough for my lifetime, whatever that might be. I have no idea how long I'll live, and that is a risk in retirement, potentially outliving your money. And so a risk that people take when they start their CPP early is when you have this nice defined benefit pension plan that the CPP is, along with the old age security, that might be our only security against living too long. So that is to say, if you get a nice defined benefit plan through work, that's great. That's probably supplying most of your cash flow needs in retirement. And then this decision is a little bit less important. You can look at the various other factors in my blog post. But if you don't have that defined benefit plan through work, your greatest risk in retirement is not dying early and not getting enough out of Canada Pension Plan. Your risk is actually living too long or running completely out of money. And then you need to think about, if I started Canada Pension Plan at age 70 and got twice as much money annually out of it than I would have gotten starting at age 60, and I do live to 100 or past 100, that is a much more significant security against that potential of living too long. And of course, those numbers again go up with inflation. So again, I might be able to provide you some more information on your particular situation if you reach out to me on my contact page. And I also just want to make note of some other great content in my latest newsletter. There is one other resource on Canada Pension Plan where it pertains to business owners who might have more decision around how much they put into Canada Pension Plan, whether they pay themselves a salary or pay themselves mostly via dividends. And also some other really good resources, especially in my scam, schemes, and terrible financial advice section. And again, for those who are not subscribers, this is an ongoing section I have in my newsletter that warns people about what type of either outright scams or weird financial schemes or just bad advice you can find out there. This month's is jam-packed with a couple of content items from a couple of friends of mine. One who, with his YouTube channel and his podcast, actually allowed himself to get scammed. He did a scam bait. That is, he didn't lose any money, but he had some communication with one of these scammers who was actually impersonating him. And also a couple of items of just terrible financial advice. And in particular, the term that gets brought up by Jason Watt in his new podcast is financial BS, which is an actual academic term that describes exactly what it sounds like it describes. He has started a new podcast I really want to recommend listening to. They're only 20-minute episodes each one sort of just briefly touching on something that's out there. So I found his first 3 episodes are ready to be pretty enlightening, even for me, and I try to keep my ear to the ground on these things. But have a listen to those. And so again, if you're not getting the newsletter and you're just someone who found this video on YouTube, or maybe I shared it on Twitter, you're welcome to subscribe as well. It's just once a month. It's not super salesy. I don't do any stock tips. I just try to provide guidance and links to some great resources to help you become a better investor and help you better plan for your future. And of course, you'll find the link to subscribe in the description of this video. I'll try to put it on the screen here somewhere as well. And if you want to get this month's newsletter, subscribing basically puts you in the queue for next month. But if you want to get this month's newsletter, simply reply to the first confirmation email that you get from me and just ask for it, and I'll forward it along to you. So anyways, so long for now.